Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
All right. Well, everyone keep loading in. We've got a great webinar, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce to you both Amy D'Angelo and Amrit Verdi. Amy is the director of ESG at SIG, and she handles the ESG department, the Energy Star department, and runs all their environmental social governance policies and procedures there at Sustainable Investment Group, and is actually consulting with GBS. Her and her team are consulting with GBS on an upcoming ESG data analyst masterclass that we're working on that's going to be launched next year. If those of you who are interested, maybe DM me on LinkedIn or send me a note. I'd be happy to share a little bit more about that as we go. It's going to be an amazing class. Welcome, Amy. And we also have Amrit Verdi. Amrit is going to be our guest presenter today. I'm excited to introduce you to Amrit. He's a senior ESG consultant at SIG. Amrit was actually an economist in London, where he advised clients on the impact of macroeconomic trends on their financial portfolios and educated companies on how to integrate ESG into their corporate decision-making process. The best part is that he actually worked for the United Nations, and he was conducting sustainable finance policy research and advising UN chief economist Elliot Harris on how to increase sustainable development funding in the world's least developed countries. Amrit, that's amazing. I have so many questions to ask you. I'd love to, after your presentation and we go through the Q&A, maybe if there's some time, you can share with the group some of your experience there at the UN.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Steve.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, I'm going to give Amrit the controls here so he can show you the slide presentation. There'll be a continuing education information at the end of the presentation. Please hold off on asking any questions about that. We'll give it to you right at the end. Amy has offered to field any questions. We're going to take some questions during the presentation as they come in. We'll try to sprinkle them in. If not, we'll try to get to all of them at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, Amrit, you've got control. Once you get your presentation up there, I'll go ahead and close my camera and enjoy the presentation.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. It's based on two topics that I'm very, very passionate about. So green building and the UNSDGs. So very glad that I can kind of share with you my experience, my knowledge, and hopefully you'll be able to tell a little bit of passion as well. So without further ado, we'll just start with a little bit of introduction. Dean already very graciously introduced myself, but my name's Amrit Verdi. I'm a senior ESG consultant at Sustainable Investment Group. And yes, I did work with the UN chief economist, Elliot Harris, in sustainable finance research. And a fun fact about my former boss, he was there when they actually wrote the SDGs. So he was there kind of developing the policies and lobbying for certain kind of inclusions and what may have you. So now when we talk about a webinar and when we talk about kind of this subject, we've got to talk about learning objectives and I was very passionate to kind of show, as much as I could. So hopefully these three learning objectives will be kind of exciting and enticing enough. And this is kind of something I really want kind of all of you to kind of gain an awareness of, such that at the end of the webinar, you'll be able to shed some light for your friends and your colleagues and other people you might meet. So, firstly, I'd love for the first learning objective. What are the UN SDGs? It's an acronym that we've heard of and we're going to hear a lot of in the future. but it's always important to kind of go back to basics and understand what they are. Secondly, how do the UN SDGs actually relate to green building? It's not only important enough to understand what they are, but also let's kind of see how they relate to kind of an area in which, kind of we all might work in or might have knowledge of. And then lastly, an area of direct importance, how the UN SDGs can be integrated into your business processes. Really important to kind of understand not only what, the UN SDGs are, how they relate to your broader industry, but also kind of how you day to day can work to, kind of spread the quote unquote gospel of the SDGs in what we all do. So here's the SDGs kind of laid out in a very neat and very colorful manner. There's 17 goals, and they all range in kind of a very diverse and kind of across a whole range of categories. So, at the start, you have kind of typical global goals that you'd imagine. So zero hunger, no poverty, quality education, gender equality. But they also encompass other things such as climate action, strong institutions, responsible consumption, and, decent work and economic growth. And kind of delving down into this, kind of a formal definition. So the UN defines the Sustainable Development Goals as 17 targets designed to be, and I quote, a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people on the planet now and into the future. And that sounds very fancy. That sounds very high level. But what does that actually mean? Well, essentially, it means that, when we're looking at ending, deprivation such as hunger or poverty or, bad health outcomes around the world, we can't do this without thinking about other factors such as health and education and other inequalities or other deprivations such as inequality or lack of decent jobs, which are also equally important. And lastly, talking about, the environment, we're at the situation now where, we're growing as, the world's getting more and more populated, the world's getting richer and richer, but we're using more and more resources. And we've got to think about how we can use the resources that we have. We only live on one world, we don't have any more in spare supply, in a responsible manner. And it's very important, and I'll kind of highlight this point, economic growth, we've got to pay for these things as well. We can't just be, making all these goals and just saying, hey, it'd be great to have no poverty and zero hunger, but, without growing that pie and making sure that everyone is kind of getting, financially, better off as well in the future. A little bit of background of the SDGs. You might wonder kind of how they cropped up and, what they are and, why they're kind of, being pushed so much in kind of, global policymaking. Well, they were developed at this conference called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and in 2015 by the United Nations, member states. So by all countries around the world, they convene in the United Nations here in New York, and they're based on a series of goals called the Millennium Development Goals, set in 1990. The UN realized that there was a whole series of kind of problems in the world, and if we are going to work together and we're going to live on this planet, we will got to try and work to make it a better place. And let's try and kind of work together and set some targets for governments, private companies, and individuals to work towards. The Sustainable Development Goals are an enhancement of them. So the first set of kind of goals by the UN looked at kind of traditional measures, so poverty, hunger, child mortality, infant mortality, stuff like that. The Sustainable Development Goals focuses more on kind of the environment as well, and that holistic measure of growth. So what I plan to do kind of now is to kind of drill in what the SDGs are. So going into a little bit of detail and then focusing on one or two bullet points on kind of, how exactly green buildings relate to this particular SDG. So, the first SDG is no poverty, and kind of how green building relates to this is, by, retrofitting current building stock to kind of higher standards, more renewable, sustainable standards, we power economic growth. We have, more investment, we create more jobs, and therefore we kind of help mitigate kind of poverty and reduce levels of poverty around the world. When we look at the second SDG, SDG 2, zero hunger, we're very blessed. When you work in the construction industry, you literally kind of change the world, quote unquote. You start with, especially if you're in new construction, you start with a plot of land, there was nothing there, or you start with an old building or a dilapidated building, and you pull it down, and then you literally build something brand new, like a new housing development or a new skyscraper or a new just kind of development. And when we're looking at kind of developing and designing kind of developments, it's very important to see kind of how we can make the design a little bit more sustainable. And in this case, when we look at zero hunger, can we include green spaces where there could be an urban farm, or can we include lawns with edible landscapes? All this helps to kind of secure our own food supply and just help kind of mitigate that zero hunger. And then SDG 3, when we're looking at good health and well-being, I don't have to tell many of you all on the call, when you look at kind of, standards such as LEED or WELL or WELL HSR, there's an increased, kind of attention towards, air quality, water quality, occupant well-being. And that's very important because, we spend a lot of time indoors, whether in the office or at home or in stores or, kind of, we're always in a building or running from one building to another building. And it's very important that, when we kind of make, homes or offices more greener and kind of more healthier, we're making them healthier for the occupants. We have improved air quality. When we use sustainable kind of building methods, we reduce health risks, we reduce toxic chemicals, being used, or toxic materials being used. And all this helps to kind of secure good health and well-being. Before I move on, are there any questions, Amy? Or
nope, I don't see any questions just yet.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to the next 3 SDGs. So I decided to tackle them kind of 3 at a time, and hopefully kind of linked into broad groups, so we can kind of you can see kind of the common themes. So when we look at SDG 4, quality education, to build, more green homes, we need to increase kind of, the workforce, training. GBES does a great job with their training and their kind of education programs. And it's really important to have kind of a workforce that's educated about sustainability. It's not something that you can just read on a website for, a few minutes and kind of get an understanding. You need to really understand these principles because, to live and operate sustainably, there has to be kind of something there, education-wise. So that's how green buildings relate to quality education. To gender equality, by being, sustainable or operating in a sustainable manner, we're acting to combat kind of, cases of gender inequality in the construction sector and helping to support kind of female leaders in the green building industry. And then lastly, in this batch, clean water and sanitation, SDG 6. When we look at upgrading a existing housing stock to kind of, greener standards or more higher sustainable standards, or building sustainable homes or sustainable offices or sustainable buildings, we're always looking at how we can reduce kind of, wastage of water, reuse water, and kind of be more sustainable in our usage of kind of municipal water. It's very important to kind of be in a case where, when you're operating sustainably, you're not only helping the environment, but also you're also helping your kind of bottom line as well. When you use less water, you obviously pay for less, and you help improve your margins as well. So moving on to SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. So this is kind of a very illustrative. When you have kind of, green buildings, you have situations where there's renewable power, which is connected to the energy grids. You have solar power or wind power or, biomass power or whatever you may have as kind of as part of your development. And that helps, kind of improve the grid. You have kind of more cleaner energy in the energy mix, as well as more affordable energy. It's stable. The modeling with solar power, you can install some solar panels. You can make sure that they're operating correctly, and then you can work out your payback time. And the cost of power is very stable after the payback. Secondly, with SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. When we invest in, construction, when we invest in green building, we help, develop industries that are very high tech, solar photovoltaic installers or technicians, scientists, which have to kind of create these, amazing products. Green jobs have been proven to be, very higher wage than non-sustainable jobs or non-green jobs. And not only that, they're one of the fastest kind of growing sectors of the labor market, especially here in the US. And then lastly, SDG 9, innovation or industry, innovation and infrastructure. So when we're looking at kind of green buildings, and when we're looking at a case of, building, something in a more sustainable manner, we have to consider kind of how we actually lay out these homes. Can we build in a more dense manner, or can we build in a more sustainable manner to help, to help kind of mitigate climate change and make communities more resilient to climate change?
All right, we got a question. I apologize for going backwards, but we had a good question about water safety. I think it's SDG 6 that you were talking about. Is water safety, i.e. waterborne pathogen reduction, how does that play, or does that play any role in SDG 6?
Yes, there's so the cool thing about the SDGs is that they have the headline. So kind of for SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, and then they have subsections. The subsection is to eradicate all waterborne diseases around the world. So stuff like kind of cholera or Legionella or stuff like that. So it plays a direct part. If we're going to achieve SDG 6, we have to build infrastructure and homes and, water infrastructure that's more just safer and healthier.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to SDG 10, reduce inequalities. So one thing I really want to try and kind of put across to everyone on the call, and we'll go into this a little bit more detail after the SDGs, is that when we talk about operating in a sustainable manner or integrating the SDGs into business processes, it's not a charity. It's not a case of like, it's just a cost line for a business. There's definitely, benefits to operating in a sustainable manner. When you think about it kind of on the surface, if we use less and, we operate in a kind of more flexible manner, we're going to be, paying less for construction costs, we're wasting less. And, if we build a property that's more efficient, that's going to be cheaper to run. And if it's more healthier, people will be willing to pay more for it. So, there's definitely, a business case for the SDGs, which is something I've worked a lot in prior positions as well as this position to kind of put across to clients and individuals. And in this light, SDG 10, when you operate sustainably, you can demonstrably have, lower construction costs. And, when you have, technologies such as renewable energy, you can have innovative and lower cost housing solutions. So this helps kind of reduce that, the pressure on kind of, in society where you have kind of, a large amount of asset inequality, wealth inequality. I don't have to tell anyone the cost of houses very recently has gone up an awful lot. So it's if we can do if we can do anything to help, provide housing at a lower cost to individuals, that's definitely got to be a good thing. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. Well, here it's kind of key in the name. We have a case now, a lot of cities around the world, a lot of, especially, here in the US as well, there's a big migration of people, especially after COVID, towards more suburban areas or more warmer areas or away from big cities. And, communities are redefining kind of how they're going to grow. And it's very important to kind of be in a position where you can facilitate that. And you can say, hey, we're building homes with more greener space. We're building homes that are more healthier to occupy, to work in, to live in. And there's a great initiative called the C40 Cities Initiative, which highlights how local entities are taking very bold steps for sustainable growth. One of the key examples which relates to kind of green buildings is, they're adopting, green energy or green certifications as part of their kind of building codes. That's something that's very important, something that's very applicable if you want to build in these cities' jurisdiction. So moving on to SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. We must consider kind of how we kind of use the resources that we have. We have one Earth. We have a fixed amount of resources, and by operating in a sustainable manner, where you operate with the kind of the end in mind, if you try and operate in a zero waste environment, you're going to redesign things such that what you buy is what you use, and you don't have any waste, and you don't have any kind of spare resources. You operate better, you feel better as well. I guess everyone's had the same like IKEA challenge that I've had, where you finish building something and you end up with just like a bunch of screws at the end and you're like, that way. So, if we can operate in a zero waste or a mindful way when it comes to the environment, we not only help the environment, but we also help our bottom line. And in my case with IKEA, you help your mental health as well. So always very helpful. Dean, I noticed some people raise their hands. Are there any questions? Or?
Yeah, no, we've got some really good questions. A clarification from Kelly is asking about these goals. Are they geared more towards residential or commercial, or is it a broad expanse of applications for these 17 goals?
Great question. It's for everyone. So it's for construction. It's for residential and commercial. So it's almost kind of an a la carte, if you will. We can take what we can from the goals and make it very applicable. I've tried to kind of illustrate the ones that are very pertinent towards green building. There's going to be kind of some areas where it's going to be a little bit less applicable, but there's definitely areas of kind of that can tie into green buildings or construction.
Yeah. And Nico has a great question. It's one that I was thinking of as well. So living in LEED and what in the well world, right? I have a rating system. I have a checklist. I have numbers, and I know when I do well and then when I don't do well, when I get a point or I don't get a point. How are these 17 goals weighted? Are they weighted? Are there, Nico asked, are there trade-offs managed between goals, and which ones are prioritized and not prioritized? I mean, how do you know that you're doing a good job with a UNSDG goal?
In the actual text of the goals itself, they have, they'd have some metrics of some kind. So when it comes to kind of zero hunger or water sanitation, it would be like, zero hunger is just zero hunger. No one hungry. But when it comes to water and sanitation, it comes to kind of no diseases around the world, so no deaths from diseases. So there's kind of some metrics there. When the UN itself as well has something called the SDG data partnership. So they actually track, and what they realize is when you set a goal, you can't have it arbitrary. You've got to have kind of a place in which you can kind of track performance over time and kind of across people. So there's a website there where you can actually see the progress, and people can upload reports and they can, see kind of progress over time. And then lastly, I'd say if you're in the private sector, if you have, if you engage one of the great things is kind of part of the work that I do, when you engage, when we engage with clients, we help kind of directly align kind of their business or, their project with the SDGs. And that really helps kind of the client kind of understand, okay, here are the goals of the SDGs. Here are kind of the sub-targets. This is what we're doing. This is how it relates. And this is kind of our progress. So those are kind of three main, kind of answers. And I hope that helps.
No, it's really good to know that there are metrics. And are there different levels of obtaining those metrics? Like in green building, we're used to a building being certified silver, gold, platinum. Is there that within each SDG, or is it a cumulative score, and then some sort of metric rating?
It's the second one, Dean. So the goals are treated equally, and there's I don't know how we can quantify kind of zero hunger as more important than reducing inequalities, as more important than economic growth. The trade-off that they made in designing it was that, they said they're all equal. You can't have one without the other. No one wants to live in a world where there's no life underwater, but we have, zero hunger. So the key thing really to kind of put into, or the key thing to put across is that as long as there's progress being made, it's okay. So certain things are more applicable to people than others. And so you don't have to worry so much oh gosh, I didn't do anything I don't do anything for climate action. That's not I'm not SDG compliant. The first thing with mapping out your SDGs impact to yourself is just defining your priorities. So what's important to you, what actually is applicable to your business or your way of working, and then, working out the priorities from there.
And is that typically done with a materiality study? Is that?
Yes, yeah. That would be kind of first point of call. You've got to talk to your stakeholders, but make sure that you understand who the stakeholders are in the company, and kind of what they prioritize, and then from there you can go onwards and define priorities and go in whatever direction the company wants to go.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Question on SDG 11 before we move off this slide. Yeah. Does SDG 11 address the migration of people from areas that are forced to move due to climate conditions, i.e. climate refugees?
That's it. That's a fantastic question.
I told you we've got a group. They come every week with great questions.
I love it. And so there's two areas. So in the industry innovation and infrastructure kind of SDG, they talk about kind of migration and population pressures. But there's also another target within SDG 11, which talks about kind of, are you growing sustainably? They don't talk so much about kind of the type of person that moves to the area. So they don't address kind of specifically, climate refugees, but they talk about kind of, are you growing your population sustainably?
Great question. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I'll move on to the next batch of 3. And don't worry, only 2 more slides of the SDGs left. But I'm expecting everyone to be an expert now. So there you go. I'll go on to.
You didn't tell them there was a quiz at the end, right?
Well, I neglected to say, But so when we talk about SDG 13, climate action, this is directly applicable to green buildings. When you kind of key in the name green, when we adopt sustainable standards for our homes and our buildings, we help decarbonize those buildings. We help reduce their impact on the environment, be it through using more sustainable materials, reusing materials, using less energy, using less water, generating less waste. We're helping to kind of do our part in kind of mitigating climate change and promoting positive action for the climate. And, SDG 14, when we talk about life below water, this is all about kind of, our impact on the oceans around the world and bodies of water. By minimizing water waste, we help lessen kind of strain on water infrastructure, and we help kind of save water for more important uses. If we can reuse our rainwater, for irrigation or for, or just other purposes, it's very important, and it helps kind of just ensure that we're living in harmony with the environment. And then lastly, SDG 15, life on land. We're very blessed, when we kind of work in the construction industry, we're able to put our stamp on the world. And, by incorporating kind of, local flora, using sustainable materials, we're able to kind of not only just build a very wonderful development that looks great, but also enhance the overall environment's biodiversity. And we can also help sequester carbon dioxide and provide more oxygen. There was a study that came out actually, which is quite interesting. The more trees you have on the street, the higher the home price is. So wow. I'm guessing if anyone's ever kind of gone to very rich, fancy parts of town, like I know in New York on the Upper East Side, there's just tree-lined streets and it's very beautiful. And it's just very interesting to see kind of, not only do you have kind of, great environment and great air, it's nice to have a little bit cleaner air in New York City is always helpful, and also have kind of higher house prices. So again, it's not a charity doing the SDGs. There are benefits that can be had from integrating them. And so lastly, the last two kind of UN SDGs, SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And here is quite interesting. When you have like kind of a green home, and when you have kind of more sustainable kind of building practices and more sustainable environments where people work and live, you have a little bit less stress. If you have better quality air, better quality water, more space, maybe some green spaces as well, it's been proven to have a positive effect on our mental health if there's some green space around. And again, it's even been proven to improve our cognition and decision-making skills. So again, there's other benefits that can arise from integrating the SDGs in your kind of business decisions or in your actions. And then lastly, SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. It's not a one-person job. It's not a one-company job. It's not a one-country job to save the environment and help the environment. We need to get everyone involved. The UN has a specific kind of department where they talk about green buildings, and because they recognize that, we've got to get all industries on board to help work towards the SDGs. So that is all of the kind of first section with the SDGs. Do we have any questions related to them, or shall I move on?
Yeah, quite a few. We did have a SDG 16 is talking about the creation of greener homes. We had a question from an attendee about the demand for greener housing options. How much influence does the real estate industry have on the green building sector? Do you either of you see green building homes gaining more traction? I mean, I know we do a lot of education on LEED, existing buildings and new construction, and usually that's commercial Class A space, and when you look at the LEED for homes rating system, there seems to just not be that kind of adoption that we see on the commercial side. Any thoughts or input on the residential side of green homes?
I can talk kind of a little bit more broadly. When you look at kind of, so what does it mean when you build a green home? Like essentially, like it shows that the developers actually thought about kind of how the home will impact, the people who live in it. And that's really important. It shows a little bit of care and attention. I know for myself, like I chose where I live directly right now because we've got a nice kind of like green lawn, and there's amenities there, and there's kind of it's a more sustainable kind of building. It does actually happen to be LEED rated as well. So, but it's there's been kind of proof or evidence in kind of research which shows that green homes fetch a higher price on the housing market, and that's, I think, like the research that I read, the reason that they gave is that the buyers actually thought the developer actually kind of put more thought into kind of the design of the home. They decided to actually make it more livable, which is very helpful. And then, as such, they were willing to pay a little bit more. And there's kind of a chicken and egg situation when you have kind of, is the demand for green homes going up? Is it on the supply side? Should the construction companies do it? Should the buyers do it? The trend is going up. I think if, in this market that's, very competitive, if you can show that you're a little bit more thoughtful to prospective buyers, I think that's always going to be valued not only in dollars and cents, but also in kind of more happier buyers.
And I would agree with you. And I would think that everyone on this webinar probably feels the same way. And sometimes I feel like we are still the minority in that, unfortunately, and, swimming upstream. But because I work, I'm on a USGBC leadership committee here and where I live, and we have some green brokers on our board. And so we discuss green homes a lot in Florida, especially, because solar panels and water reduction and just the things that can make a home greener. And I don't know, it's something that I'm always interested in. We did have a question about the C40 initiative. I know that was in SDG 11. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how some of our learners can benefit from it or maybe get involved in that?
Of course. So essentially, I'm just trying to organize my thoughts. The UN, they wanted to encourage local participation into the kind of SDGs. So they didn't want just kind of governments and, national governments and, big companies just to kind of talk about the SDGs. They wanted it kind of directly on the ground level, in the grassroots. So to take up this kind of initiative, a group of 40 cities around the world, mostly in the US, as well as around the world, they clubbed together and they basically shared kind of good practices. So, be it kind of planning ahead when it comes to kind of, the public transit investments or, sharing the latest building codes or sharing kind of, how they can directly impact kind of their environment to make sure that they're growing sustainably. And it's kind of grown into kind of this really, really interesting initiative. They presented at the UN. They had a whole kind of presentation where they said, look, this is what we've done. We work, these 40 cities, we work together and we try and promote kind of growth in a more sustainable manner. If you want to get involved, I'd recommend any panelists to kind of research the initiative and have a look if there's a city in which they operate in or they work or that they know of. And then they can kind of get involved with talking to the local government there. They'll be well aware of the initiative, especially the building department in those jurisdictions.
Wonderful. Do any of the SDGs deal with reduction of noise reduction?
Yes, that is in the third one, good health and well-being. There's I think it's like one on noise there. And then in the industry, the infrastructure one, I think what is that one? SDG 9, they talk about kind of building holistic infrastructure. That's kind of like more like human-centered. So you want to try and have like less noisy cities and stuff.
Oh, wonderful. One of our attendees said David Miller's book Solved talks about the C40 Cities initiative and how it's being implemented in cities around the world. Recommended, good read. Thank you, David. We appreciate that book recommendation. Solved, SOLVED, Solved by David Miller.
Amazing.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, so I will, if there's not any further questions, I'll move on to the next section, which is why integrate the UN SDGs into your business? It's all very well. We all want to do our part for the environment and for society, but also, we all have jobs and we all want to kind of, there's got to be a financial purpose. And this is kind of the bit that I'm most excited about kind of discussing because, again, one thing, I thought of at the start, which is, it's all very well. We have these great goals. There's, we should always do something for the environment. We should always do something for society. But okay, I'm going to go back to work and not worry about that. But the great thing is that research has found that if you actually pay attention to ESG, you have kind of greater financial performance and you have a reduction in kind of your what they call in finance downside risk and higher credit ratings. So you have less volatility. They found in my research, I'm finishing up a doctoral degree in sustainable finance. I found myself that sustainable companies have kind of faster stock price growth and lower kind of levels of risk, which is amazing to really see. And it's all to do with, what we discussed earlier. When you operate in a sustainable way, you have kind of you operate in kind of a way in which you have less waste and you differentiate yourself in the market. You have kind of a more premium product. And so this is how kind of ESG and the UN SDGs kind of link to, cash flow, dollars and cents in 5 ways. They help reduce costs, facilitate top line growth, minimize regulatory and legal interventions, increase employee productivity, and optimize investment and capital expenditures. And don't worry, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the next page. So what do we talk about by saying facilitate top line growth? Well, when you have a company or, a building that is, got integrated with the UNSDGs, which is more sustainable, which has green building certifications, you attract a wider pool of customers. You have not only the ones that originally would just want, a place to live, a place to work, but also kind of that higher tier of customers willing to pay a premium for a better designed building that's, safer, more environmentally friendly, more healthier for, their families and their employees. You also have kind of better access to resources. You're kind of a pillar in the community, if you will. You're not just building for the sake of it. You're building something that integrates with the community. You're building something that people are kind of happy to have there. Secondly, reducing costs. Well, we're operating sustainably. We have the UNSDGs here. We're talking about water consumption. We're talking about renewable energy. We're going to lower our costs on that front. And, you minimize unnecessary waste. It helps make the building more efficient. It helps make your business more efficient. It helps make everything just operate a little bit leaner and in a better way. Thirdly, when we talk about regulatory and legal interventions, we have a situation where, if any of the panelists operate in New York, if they know owners of large real estate there's laws like Local Law 97. Owners of large real estate in New York have to have a carbon emissions limit on their buildings, or they'll get fined. So if you operate in a sustainable manner, you integrate the UN SDGs in your business processes, you have a situation where you're not applicable to those fines. The government will probably award you. There's awards that go out as well as fines. So, you're on that stage where, you don't have to worry about the government coming in or potentially, fining you or putting you in code violation, or if you will. Fourthly, optimize investment and capital expenditures. When we think about things sustainably, we're thinking about things over the super long term. Is it great over 10 years, great 20 years? But what about 100 years from now? 100 years from now, do we think we'll be operating, gasoline fuel cars, or do you think we'll have, electric cars or hydrogen cars or something more cleaner? It stops when you align with the SDGs and you align sustainably. It stops you investing in stuff that could fail due to, environmental issues or due to, other issues that, you're not thinking about because you're not thinking long-term or sustainably. And lastly, we want to attract the best people, and the best people love to work for companies that have a purpose. It's all very well saying, you have a job and everyone wants to make money. It's very important. But if you can offer something else, that bigger purpose, okay, we're not just building, great real estate. We're building real estate that helps people. Well, you're going to attract the best people, and you're going to attract people that want to work hard and want to fulfill that mission. And do we have any questions, or shall I move on?
We do have some follow-up questions that we can get to when you're done.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about kind of integrating kind of SDGs, how exactly can that happen? So firstly, you've got to define your business priorities, either through kind of a materiality assessment or through kind of just discussions with your stakeholders. You've got to figure out kind of what's appropriate for your business or your company, your stakeholders, and how well you want to kind of put one thing in front of the other. So do we want to focus on energy or water? Do we want to focus on the impact of the environmental impact or the health impact of our products or of our buildings? Secondly, we have to set targets. Once we figure out what's important, we've got to figure out how to measure it. So if we define the environment as very important, well, we've got to talk about greenhouse gas emissions. We've got to think, okay, how can we limit that? Thirdly, we've got to then think, okay, we've got our target. We know our priorities. We've got our target. We've got to then do something publicly for this. We can't just say we're doing something. And, that's where ESG frameworks such as GRESB, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, or GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, play a role. We can publicly show we as a company are doing something for, for the priorities that we have, or regards to kind of ESG and the UNSDGs. And then lastly, kind of the last thing is then, okay, we've got our priorities, we've set our targets, we've publicly showed it. Now let's look at kind of broader change. Do we need to change the governing structure? Do we need to look at maybe putting in a sustainability committee, or maybe changing kind of how exactly we operate as a business? And that is it. So thank you, and thank you everyone for listening. And I hope you didn't get bored of saying SDGs lots of times. And I hope I said it correctly, and welcome any questions.
Wonderful, Amrit. Thank you. That was a really nice dive into those 17 SDGs. We've got some great questions. We've got about 10 minutes left. So we're going to pop up the continuing education information that you need. This is a webinar. It's not a pre-approved CEU. So there is no ID number, but when you self-register, you'll use this information here on the screen. There's a web, you can go to usgbc.org to register for your lead credential, and then you can go to wellcertified.com to register for your well credential. Both of those are general, not generic. That's my typo. Sorry about that. It's a general 1 hour CE. All right. So let's talk. I got some great questions coming for you, Amrit. This one, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. Have social impact bonds been applied to achieving any of the SDGs? If so, are there any examples that you can provide?
In a nutshell, yes. So there's a subset of social impact bonds called SDG bonds, and then they're broken out by the SDGs as well. So you can buy SDG 1 bonds that literally only focus on zero hunger. And then the cool thing about the payout is so it functions as a traditional bond. And then depending on the performance, the payout is kind of inversely correlated. So what that means is if the project helps reduce hunger, you don't pay interest to the bondholder. You just pay the principal back. And then if the project doesn't help hunger, then you pay back the full, kind of interest. So it kind of helps kind of incentivize people.
Wow, that's amazing. Great question, David. Thank you. Raphael has asked, how do you envision SDGs and or green building in the hospitality industry? Do either of you have working with any clients in the hospitality industry?
So, Amy, do you have any points? So I don't mind saying.
No, you can go ahead. We don't really have any clients specifically in the hospitality industry. We work with a lot of Class A office portfolios in New York City that have hospitality as part of those. So they are represented in our GRESB filings, but we don't have anything specifically hospitality related, but I'm sure Amrit has a great anecdote here.
Well, I was just going to say, well, HSR is really quite applicable here. I mean, it was developed after COVID to help kind of focus on indoor air quality and indoor air kind of efficiency. And it's really, I think it would be interesting to see kind of hospitality companies and owners of kind of hotels and to see kind of how they adopt that measure as kind of a sign to show, hey, we're taking occupant health seriously.
Yeah. I don't know if we have time. Amrit, I sent you a link to a well building standard, and maybe you could click on that and bring that up on your screen, and we can show the attendees here that how the well building standard has kind of embraced UNSDGs and their, there we go. And they're, now there's that, okay, perfect. You can see each of these features. Now everyone remembers concepts are the broad category, which this is the category's air, and then feature A01 air quality. It's hard to see, but that's the UNSDG 3, right?
It is, yeah. UNSDG 3, good health and well-being.
Good health and well-being, yeah. And so you can see down here, air quality monitoring and awareness
We've got good health and well-being, industry, innovation, infrastructure, and partnerships.
So, Amrit, when I'm a builder, developer, owner, and I'm getting my building well certified, I can also take that rating system and I have something that links up so I can show what kind of success I've had with the UNSDGs as well. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Yeah, exactly right, Dean. Exactly right. If you do, whatever the standards are in WELL, so if you did A08, you would be aligning towards these SDGs.
Nice. Yeah. And so I know LEED is also, there's some crosswalks there, or there's some synergy there as well. But I know IWBI is doing is a major push, and so I just wanted to show that to the group. What about? Good question here about SDG goals being encouraged to be incorporated in academics. Are you aware of any programs in any of the architectural or construction or schools or departments that are starting to teach our young people about SDGs?
I know someone who's studying in New York University, and I think they're doing like a master's in sustainable architecture, and they have a module all related towards the SDGs, and so they have coursework related. So I'm not sure about generally in academia, but I would imagine they're definitely spreading in architectural schools when we talk about sustainability.
Well, I know it's going to be a big part of our conversation in our ESG data analyst masterclass or certificate. And then as obviously moving forward in 2023 in creating our overall ESG education, and it'll be a big part of that as well. We have a few minutes left. I'm going to respect everyone's time at the top of the hour. Hopefully everyone got the information for the continuing ed. Can either of you give the group any recommendation where they can find data about green building and its benefits for employees? For example, 50% of regular occupants feel less stressed in well-certified buildings. Where can our group go and find some of those studies that will help them continue to promote and talk about green building and wellness?
So I found, I went on the WELL website, and in the footnotes, they actually had a study. It's where I kind of got that broader point from. I'm not sure of of any other kind of exact studies, but I would encourage people to go onto the frameworks or the WELL leads, WELL HSR, FitWell standards. They would have kind of an evidence page, if you will, of kind of areas where they can reference or where they reference from.
Wonderful. Everyone's asking for the link for the WELL building standard. I don't have, for some reason.
I can put that in the chat. You
can? All right. Maybe that, as Amrit, he's still the host, he can put that in the chat for the group. And then we have a great question here. We got another couple minutes. One of our attendees is currently constructing numerous steel modular multifamily units. What does are steel modular buildings or anything like that addressed in UNSDGs?
There's nothing specific about it as far as I'm aware. Of like kind of, it doesn't go into the good thing about the SDGs is that it's kind of it's a little bit general. It allows a lot of creativity. So they talk about housing, but they don't talk about specific types of housing. They just say they want housing to be sustainable and aligned to how humans operate. So,
and if I were to push the envelope on that, I would maybe modular, maybe pre-construction, that pre-industrialized reduces waste, right? And so that was one of the things that you had talked about is getting lean, and I know we're learning more here at GBS about building, taking a lot of the construction away from the construction site and building off-site, because one, it's safer for the employee, it reduces waste and loss, and you can build portions of buildings now and transport them to the job site and just plop them right into place like a Lego. So it's amazing where that industry is going, we hope to have some more, some webinars and some content coming up over the next year about that as well. All right, great questions here. Megan is learning about UNSDGs in her MBA program, Sustainable Business Practices. Megan, all right. Maybe you guys need to reach out to Megan and see if we got an internship going on there. We've got, we have University of South Florida representing from Patel College of Global Sustainability. They're studying UNSDGs as well.
Cool.
All right, wonderful. Lots of great questions, everyone. Hopefully we got to a good portion of them. Amrit, Amy, I would connect with either of them on LinkedIn. If you have any, if that burning question that you asked that we didn't get to, I apologize, but maybe connect with them on LinkedIn, ask the question, create a relationship, a rapport. Everyone over at Sustainable Investment Group, all of our instructors and webinar presenters, very, very helpful, personable people. And we really appreciate what both of you are doing on the ESG front and just, making our planet a better place to be.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your time today, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.